Great to be able to welcome you in on a somewhat rainy Thursday here in the nation's capital. We have today for you a fantastic lineup. We begin with those ambulances. You may have seen them on the streets of the district. New ambulances bearing the signage AMR. They're under contract to the city, part of an effort to cut response times when a resident or visitor has a medical emergency. Chief Gregory Dean joins us now with an update on how this is going. Good to have you again. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time very much. Give us a sense of how, has it been a week, 2 weeks? It's not been that long. How long have these ambulances?
It's been a week that they've been on the street. Our initial responses have been positive. The thing you have to remember, though, is that we've actually, because we work 4 platoons, each shift has only seen it 2 times so far. And so it's really pretty early in the process.
Are you handling the deployment of these vehicles day by day based on how many vehicles are in the shop and what sorts of calls for service you're seeing? I guess I was under the assumption, perhaps people listening to us now were as well, that they were going to be sort of out there every day just because the contract had taken effect.
They are out there every day. They're out there from 0700 in the morning to 0100 in the morning, our busiest peak times. So AMR is responsible for dispatching their units. We get our fire engines, our ambulances on service, on site. We then request them, and then they deploy their resources. And what you will see throughout the district is they have resources deployed throughout the district.
So to the extent that you've got the vehicles to handle the calls that come in, most of the time, the AMR units may never leave the garage.
Oh, no, just the opposite.
Okay.
So the idea behind using AMR is to keep our units in their first response district. So they're able to respond. They make a determination. If the patient is not in a life-threatening situation, then we will call for AMR. So what we've seen so far is about 1/3 of our responses we're calling AMR, and they're transporting the patient to the hospital. That allows us to get our units back in service and be available for the emergency responses.
Why was this company chosen?
Well, it was a bid that went out. Again, that was the Office of Contracting and Procurement that does that. So they put a bid out. AMR won that bid. And so they're the ones providing the service currently.
And their background is obviously in this area. They've got not all of the equipment, I guess, that your best units have, so to speak, but they are ambulances that can do the job when they're needed.
Their ambulances are very similar to ours. They have emergency medical technicians on theirs, same as we have on our ambulances. All of the paramedics are what we call our advanced life support. We will continue to transport those type patients, so they don't need those type of resources here in the district.
How will you track this going forward?
So we're tracking in a couple different ways. We are tracking their response times to see how soon they get there. That's part of their contract. We are looking at the types of alarms our members are going on to decide should this have been should we have called AMR or should we have transported. We're looking at what we're seeing in the street, so that allows us to decide how we define our training. It allows us more time to do training. Additionally, as we get more new apparatus in the district to replace our older ones, we're looking at being able to do more maintenance and keep our vehicles up and running.
I noticed that when the shooting occurred at the Capitol, I don't know how many vehicles, how many people, and how much equipment was dispatched to the scene. Obviously a very significant and chaotic event. I saw on one of the networks where there was an AMR rig parked prominently in front of the Capitol for quite a period of time during the real scare part of that incident.
Well, again, that one there, last Monday was a pretty hectic day, if you remember. Mm-hmm. Just prior to that, we had 17 people from the crew team in the water, and then we had the shooting at the Capitol. We actually didn't use AMR. They came over, and this is the nice part about AMR, is that as they see big events happening and unfolding, they will come over to see if they can also assist us in getting. But in this case here, we ended up with 2 patients. DC Fire DMS are the ones that transported those 2 patients.
Phone lines open as we talk with the head of medical and fire and emergency medical services in the District of Columbia, Chief Gregory Dean. If you have a question or comment for him, grab an open line right away. Those of you watching live in the 11 a.m. a.m. hour. That's when we can and do take your calls. A couple more minutes with Chief Dean. If you have a thought, a question, comment, or suggestion for him, grab an open line now. We've posted the number to the bottom of the screen, and we'll go to the phones as your calls come in. Again, our number here, area code 703, and then 387-1020. You mentioned maintenance. Nice to be able to have that breathing space, so to speak, so that equipment stays in tip-top condition. There's a lot of wear and tear on the units. They're out in the heat of the summer, cold of the winter. You want your maintenance people to have the chance they deserve to work on whatever the equipment is.
Yes, we do. Again, we drive these vehicles from a cold start to going to high performance right away. They take quite a beating. Having that ability to do that helps everybody. And so, and for not only for our members, but the public to have confidence that our vehicles will get there and get there in a timely fashion. It's just as important. The
training piece, too, very much part of why this whole conversation began, right?
Yes, so we're now able to, we're taking 5 units in the morning, 5 in the afternoon, and taking them down and doing training with them. This session here, we're doing assessment and documentation and just ensuring that we're building a great baseline for everybody.
In terms of what you might describe or refer to as the public education piece, working with people so that they know, just like we try to communicate clearly and frequently with the public on when to use 911 generally, when to call for an ambulance, and when really we're talking about a taxi, we're talking about a friend, we're talking about a volunteer from church or another organization, not an ambulance, an ambulance, because we know and we've seen recently and not so recently that when ambulances get dispatched to things that are clearly non-emergency, someone in distress, a child, a senior, anybody, could die or could not get less than the service they would otherwise receive because an ambulance is being a taxi.
So our resources do get tied up when everyone calls 911. We in the district have a history of transporting everybody. We're changing that model, but we're starting with working with the Department of Health and other agencies to put resources in place for those callers that have something. You know, we're looking to use on-call nurses and things to help people figure out if it's not an immediate emergency, how we can get them assistance.
To the phones, line 1, Wani in Southeast, you're on the air. Hi. Thank you for calling, and go ahead, jump right in.
Good morning. My name is Juanita Hammond. I'm a retired EMT from D.C. Fire Department.
Hi,
the chief is up there on the telephone, on the air right now, talking about AMR and D.C. Ask him, please, once AMR goes to the hospital and once D.C. Fire goes to the hospital, why does it take so long for them to get a patient on the bed?
From the door to a bed, you mean?
Yes.
Thank you.
So what happens at the hospital is they have a number of patients that come in, and those patients get prioritized. Priority 1 being patients that are brought in by our paramedics that have life-threatening. Even if you are there in as a priority 2, 3, or 4, you will get bumped based on what the patient looks like. The reason that we did the contract with AMR is to get our units released or not go to the hospital at all so they could be back on the street and available to respond to emergencies within their district.
You mentioned a moment ago, we have about a minute left, you mentioned a moment ago that you're working with the health department making changes in terms of how 911 calls get responded to. If ever you want to come back and talk with us about that more, we would love to be part of that, because I think that's something where we all have skin in the game in terms of how valuable critical public resources get used and are always available for the real emergencies.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Can you give us a sense of just super briefly about what we can anticipate in that area?
Well, what we're anticipating is trying to put resources in place to assist those, such as possibly even using Uber scripts, being able to make appointments for people, sending them to clinics so that we can free up the caller's question about the crowded ER rooms. That's the most expensive medicine. We're trying to free that up for real emergencies.
Chief Gregory Dean, Head of Fire Rescue Services in the District of Columbia. Always great having you here. Come back anytime.
Thank you.
Chief Dean, thank you very much. We're back with more News Talk after this.